Hi guys, Sandy here. Today we're going to talk about muffs, fur muffs. Ooh, so soft. So I had a bride ask me if we could make muffs for her bridesmaids, and that's her wedding dress back there, all packaged up. And yeah, what a great idea. They're everywhere. I've been seeing them at Nordstrom's and lots of really fancy stores, and they have a couple of different kinds. So this one has some firmness to it. You can see it's pretty firm. It's not floppy, and it has 3 layers of batting in it and a layer of the plastic horsehair. So that gives it some structure. It'll stand up all by itself. It's not floppy. But you also see the ones with the foam inside, so they're very round. You can get that shape that they're very structured. To me, that looks a little juvenile. I think this looks a little bit more elegant when they're holding it, and I'm going to hopefully get a picture of all the girls, or at least one of the girls with the muffs. I have 5 of them that I made, and this one, the dimensions on this one, it ended up being 11 inches wide, which is what she wanted, and this is 21 inches around this way. So I have a little tutorial. It's kind of in snippets that will follow this, about how I cut them out and the process for making them and how to move forward. And then yeah, they're finished off with a ribbon inside where the seam is, because you know the only problem with using that plastic horsehair is if any of it sticks out, it's picky. So we want to make sure that we cover all of that. But this, so soft, right? So these are muffs. They're everywhere. I think I'm going to make one for my granddaughter. I think she will love it, maybe out of a pink fur. And now's a great time to actually, speaking of getting the fur, it's a great time to get the fur because it's the end of the season. So a lot of the smaller retailers, I mean, this is not real. A lot of the smaller, although it looks really real, it feels gorgeous. This is from Mood. I will give you the information. I will put that down below. This is from Mood, this fur. It is brown and black printed and embossed stretch fur, but I'll put the codes down below, and we just got it, so this is so I know. And then it's lined with a black stretch twill back satin, so it's got a lot of really good structure. So anyway, I was saying about the furs, you know, they're going on sale for some of the smaller places. This is from Mood. Mood keeps fur pretty much all year round, but some of the smaller stores like Joann, their fur might go on sale pretty soon, and you can buy them in anticipation of making muffs for Christmas for everybody next year. I mean, this is a pretty short process, and what a great Christmas present this would be. It's pretty elegant. It's not something you would go out and buy for yourself. I mean, I saw there was a real one on Nordstrom's, and it was like $495. I mean, that's crazy, crazy. So anyway, let the games begin. You can follow along and watch about making a fur. All right, today we're going to talk about making muffs. All right, so here is my sample muff, and I cut out the approximate size that I thought the bride would want, and then had her come in and try it. And as it turned out, I initially had, obviously you want to make it a little bit bigger, so she wanted it a little bit more narrow, which I can fix. And then I had like an extra 8 inches. You can see here, initially I had it, there's another pin in there. Initially I had it about this big. Now, that's all personal taste and style, but right now all it is stitched up the side. So we're gonna take it in a little bit, that's fine, and then we're gonna make it about 8 inches smaller. So before I went and cut them all out, I wanted her to take a look at it and make sure this is really what she had in mind. And this one is, I will show you the stuffing as we make it, but this one's stuffed with very soft batting as opposed to foam core, which would make it really round and hard. Those, to me, tend to look a little more juvenile, but they're really kind of the classic shape, and you can still find them with that hard, kind of firm, very firm foam inside them. I think something a little bit more elegant is this kind of softer look. So that's just a personal taste. And you also want to consider when you cut the fur that the lines of the fur are going this way and not this way. this wouldn't look quite as nice as it's going around, where this gives it a nice circular look. So I've cut out 4 strips that are going to be the width of this, and I'm just going to cut the right length. This is too long, so I'm going to cut them all the right length, and then I am going to cut the batting and the lining. I'll be back. Alrighty, we have cut out all of our pieces. I have the fur top, which in this case is 22 inches long and 12.5 inches wide. I cut out my lining, which is a black taffeta. That is also 22 inches long, but it's only 11.5 inches wide, so it's an inch smaller than the muff. So when I sew it to the muff, the little pieces where the hands go in, the fur will wrap around a little bit. You won't see the edge of the seam. Then I've cut out, this muff happens to have 3 layers of batting and a layer of horsehair. That's what the bride was looking for. She wanted something stiff, but not super stiff. So there's different ways to do it. You can put 2 layers of batting in and no horsehair, and they're soft. It depends on the look that you're going for. So these pieces of batting are cut a little bit bigger than the fur. So they're a little bit bigger. They're like 23 inches long by maybe 13 inches wide. And what I did was I just zigzag tacked the horsehair to the batting. And now I'm going to, since there's 3 layers and I want to hide this horsehair, I'm going to sandwich it inside 2 layers of batting. This piece happens to be cut on a fold. I'm just going to sandwich it inside like that. So now I have my horsehair and 2 pieces of batting. So there's 3 battings there. And then I'm going to sew this to the wrong side of my lining. And you have a couple of options. You can see this is bigger, and that's what we want. We want to have some give. So you have a couple of options here. You can stitch this down with your machine. You can just use that regular zigzag right on the edge, so you won't see it, or you can take it right to the serger, or you can do both. You can stitch it and then go serge it if you're a little timid, and that's fine too. But what we want to end up with is 1 unit, where inside here is the 3 pieces of batting. There's 2 other pieces, and the horsehair is inside. And with this particular one, you can see I zigzagged it first, and then I took it to the serger. And I don't want to make this black lining smaller, so I really just caught it on the edge. I may have caught it a couple of places a little bit, but really, in reality, I want to keep this the same size. I don't want to make this any smaller. You can also, so this one I took right to the serger, and you can see that I missed in some of the areas, which is going to make this a little bit more difficult to sew. I'm going to have to pay attention when I stitch this to the fur. But the point here is that now you have 1 unit to sew to the fur, as opposed to 3 layers of batting, a layer of horsehair, and the lining. Trying to juggle that all at the same time with the fur on top gets very slippery. So this is now 1 piece, so it's perfect. And what I'm going to do now is take and stitch down the long side. I'm going to match the side edges and stitch all the way along the long side of this piece. And then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to stitch the other side. And what you're going to notice is that the fur is about 1 inch bigger, because this is 12.5 and this is 11.5, which is what we want. So I'm going to slide the fur back and make those side seams even when I stitch them. And I'm only going to use like maybe 3/8 of an inch, no more than 1/2 inch because of the size. But this is bigger now. This fur is bigger, which is perfect, because when we turn this tube inside out, or right sides to, the lining, and you'll see the lining is going to be smaller, so it's going to pull the fur to the inside, which gives us this really pretty angle when we look at it. You don't see like a seam line right around the edge. So it looks a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit more high-end. And if you look at some of these muffs and bags, it's a technique that they use on high-end pockets, on high-end collars. The underpiece is always a little smaller, and it just pulls it in so you don't see that. So it's really kind of a great little trick to use for some of your other garments too. You don't even have to use it for just this. So now I'm going to go sew everything together, and we'll come back. We'll have 5 little fur tubes. All right, we have, or I should say, sewn both sides, right sides together, of this whole package of the lining and then the fur. And again, you can see that the fur is a little bit bigger than the lining. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this tube inside out, and those heavy, hefty seams can point out towards the fur. And you have to futz with it a little bit. But then you have this really nice fur, and if you look at the edges, see, and with this one, you can, this one's all flattened out. I played with this one. You do have to give them a little, you do have to play with them a little bit. See how this curves in just a little tiny bit on both sides? Because this is smaller than the fur. So from the outside, and even from the side angle, all you see is fur. Now you could line it with fur, and with this fur it would work because it's very soft and it's a little stretchy. But if you had a heavy, bulky fur, you wouldn't want that. So this way, you see that you have a little overlap of the fur, but on the outside, it looks so clean. And you don't have that, sometimes you know how you have like the lining peeking through? You don't get any of that. So that is, we're almost done now. And I had to make 5, and it's taken me a couple of hours, but you could whip these up, and you could probably whip one up in a couple of hours. It shouldn't be any trouble at all. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to make it into a cylinder, right? So we want to turn it into a cylinder that looks like this, right? Except we need to finish the edges. So this padding is so heavy that it slips around, and it's slippery with the pins. So what I'm gonna do, because I want these 2 seams, I'm folding the fur in on itself, I want these 2 seams to match right here on the edge. So I'm just gonna take a needle, nothing fancy. I'm gonna put it through the seam on one piece, and then put it through the seam on the other piece, and I'm gonna do a whip stitch. Just, like I said, nothing fancy, just something that will hold those 2 pieces in place. And I'm gonna do this for each side seam. And again, it doesn't have to be anything pretty because it's gonna be hidden, or you can take it out even. You could use, you know, lime green thread if you wanted, and take it out afterwards. But basically what I want to do is tack it together, because the pin is just not going to give me as neat of a seam edge as I can get with the needle. So I'm going to do that on this side, and I'm just going to do it on this side where the seam allowances are. So I've done it on this one, and you can see that my edge is really clean there. So that's important. Then, so I'm going to do that on each one of them. So it's partially closed, and then I can go back in and pin the fur, because I want to stitch the fur with the sewing machine. It gives a better look in the front. I could hand stitch it, but I'm going to stitch it with the sewing machine, and then I'll finish this part by hand. So we'll talk about that next. So I'm going to go tack my corners and stitch, pin the fur together, and stitch my fur right sides together, so when I turn it the other way around, I'll have a nice tube and I'll have a nice clean seam. And then we'll talk about finishing the edge. Now, one thing, at this point, if you wanted to put in a cording to go around the neck, or a little wrist strap, this bride doesn't want those, this would be the time, because you can stick them in these seam allowances here on the edge, and you can do a beautiful, they do beautiful around the neck cordings. And a lot of times know that what we're seeing now is just a little wristband. You know, take, maybe 10 inches, just enough to get your hand in there so you can let it dangle from your wrist, and it looks super cute. Yeah, but these are gonna be clean, nothing on them. So yeah, I'm gonna move forward and try to get these little puppies finished. Okay, so we stitched the corners by hand of each one of these, matching these little seams here where the fur and the backing come together. And then there's so much padding in here, and they're so heavy. Instead of just stitching the fur together, I ended up stitching the fur to one side of the backing, and that actually made more sense. So sometimes you have to back up and take a look at what you've got, because this is so firm, and I'm not just covering a tube, it's all kind of one piece together. So I have stitched the 2 layers of fur to one side of the back. So I have one side left open, and I have my tube, and I'm going to turn it so the fur is on the outside. Just to make sure, before I stitch it up, finally that everything is okay. All right, so, and they need, you know, you need to play with them a little bit and futz with them, but really pretty, right? I mean, how nice is that? What a great little gift for you bridesmaids. So I'm going to turn those back because I need to, obviously I need to finish this. So this one is the same way. The 2 layers of fur is stitched to the backing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap this other piece, the second half, this raw edge. I'm going to overlap the other raw edge and hand stitch that down. You can see it's really difficult to work with because it's so thick. So sewing those 2 seams together would be impossible. So I'm going to stitch that down by hand. Just give it like a little running basting stitch so it won't go anywhere. Put one more pin in it so you can see, get the idea. Ah, it's so heavy, it's bending my pins. All right, okay, I give up on that. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to cover it with a grosgrain ribbon. And then this is heavy enough, because this is picky with some of the horsehair in there. This is heavy enough that you won't get picked. They won't get picked when they put their hands inside, and it won't be scratchy. So that's how the inside will be finished off. And then once that's all done, we're done. Yoo-hoo! So these were quite the project, but really, how cute. So I'll have some final pictures of the inside once I get them finished, and then also hopefully pictures of the girls wearing them all lined up. So I think it'll be fabulous. These are great for ski season, great for winter weddings, and yeah, so soft, so soft.